have three-based products in your homes, be cabinets or tables. We think it's not tax enough in order for us to offset all the environmental harms that it has caused to society. Firstly, what does it mean by biodiversity related tax? We think this relates to everything, because everything, when you cut down a tree, this means that you have to commit deforestation, you have to cut down habitats, you have to do everything. This means that anything that cut down the trees means that there's a biodiversity, the entire community is going to be affected by it. Secondly, on setup, we tax timber itself. What are we going to tax? Firstly, we're going to tax any developers in the supply chain, be it manufacturers, people who cut down trees, and those who develop all these furnitures to make it into all these trees to make it into a furniture to begin with, will tax them off. This is for us to reduce production and usage of timbers. Secondly, we're also going to increase the cost for you to hold the license, for you to maybe cut down trees, or for you to create anything that is based on trees. We are also going to protect the rate of high and low taxes, even if we have to protect high taxes, we're willing to defend that. So what will we do with the money? Firstly, we're going to do things like sustainable forestry, carbon offset programs, or subsidies for green companies to begin with. Because we have a high tax, this means that we have a lot of capacity in order for us to allocate to all these programs today. This will be subsidized by the second argument later. So in which instance we tax a particular product, we think that this rate should happen in a metric where it's justified tax for us to actually have. First and foremost, first argument that we have is the production. So the thing is about trees that it harms a large part of society. That's what causes all the environmental problems today. All the rest things like greenhouse problems, carbon emissions, is all related to trees. Because of this rapid production of timber means that we have less trees to produce oxygen into the air. Secondly, the biggest problem about this entire thing is that there is so many different companies, and these companies are not small companies. Right now, these are big companies that can cut down hundreds and thousands of trees every year, maybe to even 2 million. This means that because there's so many different companies doing this, there's a rapid production that cuts down so many trees that harms our environment every day. Thirdly, there's solely the land. In order for us to meet the demand of society, this means that we have to cut. There is a limited product that we have, and therefore you can never meet the demand. That's why there is no carbon offset program. There is literally no way for you to achieve all these net zero or anything like that, because you can never meet the demand that the suppliers need. Now, the rate of usage of timber is higher than the rate that we can go down. It's a time lag here, that's why you need to increase production. So the mechanism is very simple. Taxing means increasing cost of production. Therefore, now if probably going to bigger base in the market, and okay with that, if that means that there's lesser cooperation that wants to develop timbers, because they will want to do something else that's alternative to timber. I will explain that later. Now, secondly, it also goes to deter buyers from buying because the price is high. Now, buyers will think before they buy, and they will do something else, maybe do something else before they buy all these things, right? Now, we're going to decrease production and lesser trees will be cut down. Second argument that when we tax them, we think that there is in need for us to tax them to offset all the externalities. The parallel here is public transportation. When you use public transportation, you need to pay for all these things that you do, right? However, we don't think that these companies actually pay for all the other things that they cost. They in fact, even get more profits for all the things that they have get. So the parallel is very simple. These big companies, because they also pay taxes, because they also pay taxes to the government, they also need to repair for all the externalities, for all the harm that they have done to the mother earth. But for now, it's not only about trees or much more, because trees are very much an integral part of our world today. Things like soil erosion, deforestation, global warming, and greenhouse gases, all caused by trees. There's an urgency for us to solve it now, and so we need to tax it in order for us to actually solve this issue by the trees. So to solve this problem, we can do two things. Firstly, having more green technologies and reconstructing one of these. We can do this by using the taxes. How so? Firstly, on green technologies. Now, because green companies need capital for them to innovate, we provide them exactly that. Why does green technologies require so much capital, right? Because this is particularly a very new industry to begin with. Because you need to have a lot of R&D, trial and error at the beginning. Which means that there are not that many investors for you to do all this. But it's still a need for you to do all this, because this serves up, because this gives the earth in the long run. So we tell you that the government has to care about this, because it's about the care of the people, and government has to care about the people. So this money is going to be used to these green companies. It's more likely for them to save the environment at the end of the day. Secondly, due to high amounts of capitalism and other companies small green tech companies can go against these web tech companies, right? This means that these small companies cannot develop themselves because they cannot produce things that's of the same level, of the same quality. Therefore, they have lesser capital for them to develop all this. They have to go against big companies such as Tesla, because I don't think any companies in Asia can go against that, as an example. So what does government can help them with? First, you can subsidize green companies. You can help them ease the cost of production for them to develop all of the things they want to develop. You can ease the cost of R&D, and you can supply more R&D costs in universities, as an example, for us to have more research and development in this particular idea. Secondly, you can use the money for the conservation of trees. Like, because in order for us to offset carbon emission, we have to plant trees for them to convert the carbon to oxygen, practical science. So, thirdly, how people react. I think it's very important as well. Firstly, people will think twice before they buy anything because this is expensive, right? Because you tax them out. But before 16 people, nothing. Cool. So, because it's expensive, you think twice whether you need this thing or not. Because you don't think you need it, you're less likely to buy it. That's how you need to buy it in the first place. The parallel to this is when we improve it, we consume less and we buy less. Why so? Because we think twice before we buy something. Because we have lesser purchasing power at the end of the day. This means that because people buy less, there's much more minimalism going on, we think that's a less benefit and the best. Secondly, even if they buy it, because they still need furniture at the end of the day, right? They will think about alternatives before they buy all these cheaper products. They will look for things that's more environmentally conscious. It's more likely to save the environment rather than just famous. Why so? We think that because people are more environmentally conscious as a and it could turn all around because people are more environmentally conscious because of social media, because of the plethora of images and things that you see on social media. People are more likely to want to buy things that's more environmentally good for the company. Maybe it's not even good for the life. Maybe it's not conscious thing, maybe it's unconscious thing. We think both still brings the benefit. This means that people will still buy the products, but they will still buy good products because they do not want to feel guilty of buying these products at the end of the day. So what have we proven? Firstly, we have proven to yourself you are going to determine the amount of products produced, and secondly, we prove that because there is low demand, this means also that you wouldn't have all this money going to all these expensive products to go for set down. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, today the government stand out and saying about how they are going to tax the development and to reduce the production and increase the cost of assets. So ladies and gentlemen, the first problem is you have to understand the chain reaction of economy where when you tax someone, it also will affect the other people, not only maybe the people that pay taxes because it's a chain reaction. Ladies and gentlemen, for example, like the inflation that we're going to be further elaborate by mindset as well. Why the second place is talking about how is tax going to be used to subsidize the company and create a sustainable forest. So ladies and gentlemen, we have to look at it sustainable before we go deeper in their side. Because why? We have to understand that the tax implementation itself are not being described clearly by the government side. Because we know when we try to create new taxes, we have to know who's the stakeholder clearly. Because when we are trying to create a tax, we have to know when. How about the investor? Because they are still one of the stakeholders here too. Two, what about the owner of the timber production itself? And three, how about the consumer will react? So, in terms of implementation, the biggest fail is they don't understand how big is the mother nature. Since we are not talking about Malaysia, we are not talking just about our neighbour country, we are talking about the biggest scale ever. So when we are trying to implement in these steps, we have to know, we need to have someone that know about it. We have to train someone to go and to check. Either this guy is actually logging through going to damage the environment, or are we going to say that, yeah, we just tax it, like we don't really know what happened, yeah, just tax. But then, this loophole in their sense of implementation are the why it will become more damaging because we know that even nowadays when we don't have taxes to the timber, there are so many illegal logging that happens. So what if in the world where the timber itself are keep being taxes, but the demand are still not properly called by their side because of what? Then people will go to the illegal logging, they will go to try to black market supplies and all. Second one, when we are talking about how they're trying to deconstruct the monopoly, they didn't understand the fact that when you increase the cost of license, then not all companies going to have the license and it's still made. There will create a new monopoly. Yeah, it might not be the current monopoly, but at the end of the day, it still will create some sort of a monopoly because not everyone public places like basic. So even though they subsidize the small company, then at the end of the day, when you have to know the license is high. So to what extent does the subsidy going to go, and how extent of the tax are going to be done is not tallied by their side, ladies and gentlemen. And they are talking about the people who read by hold on a second. But then, ladies and gentlemen, in this world, we know that luxury product has the opposite effect. The moment you make it much more difficult to obtain, the more people obsess with it. So at the end of the day, the consumer actually may react like how iPhone 15 happened nowadays. The more and more iPhone keep coming and people keep demanding more. Yeah, they say that people they have environment, but we know that there's a lot of people in this world that actually use 100% people to make their house because they find it as something that brand. So it still has this effect of people demanding. And the effect in the long term is also are not really provided by them. And going to people on my impact of their invested itself. So we know that usually the country that work on the timber production are mainly factor on the timber sector are the third world country or the developing country. So usually we need to have the investor from the other side. So when we are limiting the facts that there's a tax, then it will be a low return and a low profit sector. So this will actually affect the fact that the price is still increasing but there's no investors, and then it will become a really stagnant field. Yeah.
Investors do not only have to invest in timber products, they can also invest in green-related products.
Well, but at the end of the day, we know the change of demand, the change of things, we were talking about how there's a country that will really dependent on this sector or field. So then they will lose their investor, which actually affect the people that in the sector. So going on to that, and it also will happen in the sustainability, because we know that the big company, our big corporate company is actually one of the biggest pioneer in trying to sustain the forestry. Because what you can see, like for example, we have Petronas that is starting to make many ESG planning and all, is due to the fact that even though they are a big company, even though they already have the resource, they do have the awareness, because why the current policy already have the effect. And what we say, we don't say that because the knowledge policies already have a loophole. But then for you to come out and say, wow, we're going to make a new policy, it is unreasonable when you couldn't cover the current loophole, ladies and gentlemen. So is there anything else?
Timber is already an important industry. Why won't it be regulated by the state? So to minimize a lot of harms to yourself.
So, well, at the end of the day, we could understand that timber is something that we still need to, because there's a certain country that still mainly depends on our natural resource, and they usually depend on the timber production itself. And even in our country, there's a rate of 13.3% in timber exportation. Because why? Because we know that Malaysia actually has a really sustainable forestry that actually maintains how the timber itself going to produce. And that's why the demand is something that are not easily controlled, just putting on the taxes, and it's not easily controlled to put it on the manufacturers, and that's why the opposition stands and the government fault.
Right. The timber industry isn't a small industry that is benefited by maybe some like art sculptures made by local artists, or even just like some carpenters like you can see in Singapore, for example, right? They're a $1 million industry. Thailand makes a lot of money from logging and selling its logs and timbers overseas. And the industry has a chokehold in the market that makes a lot of individuals actually become super reliant on people at the end of the day. What it means is that A, the demand and the supply are always going to be high for as long as you don't find an alternative or you don't push for an alternative for regulations or state mandates to actually make sure that you can reduce and replace the use of people at the end of the day. The point in which we're going to prove to you in some speech that there is an environmental issue that comes with it, and it's only on the side of government that you push corporations to find alternatives. That's how we win. That's how we reduce climate change factor. I'm going to give you an argument later about why the United Labour pushes for alternatives, and this is good for the general public. But let's just deal with the case coming from the side of opposition. At first, they say that tax affects people and it causes a chain reaction. A, we don't know to what extent, but let's just take their case at best that it does make products expensive and it does, to a certain degree, make people suffer. Number one, I don't know how people suffer by buying more expensive paper or buying more expensive tables because they do this maybe once a year during Raya, for example. But sure, it can be more expensive when it comes to buying bigger products, but it's always for a good reason, right? Because of the fact that you have a large global demand, the fact that you have overpopulation nowadays, and also because of the fact that people are spending their money more than ever right now because of the rise of materialism, for example, means that there is a need for corporations to create rapid production and manufacturing of paper. What it means is that because of the fact that you have to do a lot of logging at a massive scale to take down all these trees and to cater to supplying this demand and supplying these products to match up with the demand, what it means is you're likely going to fasten the climate change effects that exist. So the benefit on their side is sure, paper products are cheap, but they cannot use it long because afterwards the earth will die, and the values on our side, it's expensive but they get rid another day. The second problem that they claim to you is that, well, you still have black market issues, for example, because a lot of people will still be reliant on timber, for example. A, I think companies are still bound by regulations, and the point when they do break or violate these regulations and the state caught them in their act, what's likely going to happen is they're going to get sued or even they're going to get shut down. I think big companies are not dumb enough to actually do this because of the fact that they have a large spotlight onto them. Sure, maybe smaller companies will do this, but smaller companies wouldn't survive anyways. The fear of legal repercussions means that they won't opt into black markets and everything, so this is a non-issue at all. The last thing they said was in terms of monopolies, because of the fact that large corporations are the ones that are going to buy expensive licenses and they have the capital to do so. So at the end of the day, obviously it wouldn't really affect them, but also it's going to affect smaller companies. I think this is not true at all for a lot of reasons. Number one, every single time taxes increase or maybe the prices of commodities increase that raises the cost of production, what's likely going to happen is companies will still look into profits and gaining profits. So what's going to happen is corporations are going to transfer those costs towards the consumers. So because of this, obviously the demand for these commodities will go down because people just don't think it's worth it enough for them to actually buy a specific timber related product at this price range. What's going to happen is precisely because the lesser the demand is towards these specific companies, what it means is these companies are likely going to lose profits, and that is how you deconstruct monopolies at the end of the day. So obviously, the mechanization that came in some stage to prove to you why this taxation works and is going to damage companies is one that is at the utmost important. Opposition still doesn't have an argument and still loses out in this regard. The one issue I want to talk about here that is important is how do we kickstart green production, and this is a big premise that was totally missed out by opposition. The framing to this issue here is simple, that big corporations maximizes our resources to maximize profit. And it's good that opposition gave an example about Petronas, because companies like Petronas, BB Oil, Shell for example, they all know that the statistics will show that climate change effects are real, and they all know that the more they keep on doing this, the likelier it is that maybe we'll be facing at the end of the world. But the reason why they still do this is precisely because of the fact that these industries are very much lucrative, so they're trying their best to pick on all of these resources and make the most out of that money, and then maybe afterwards they shift into greener technologies. What is the problem here, Madam? The problem here is that at the point where we do run out of these resources, for example, there is a time lag for companies to shift their business model from maybe selling environmentally degrading products to greener products. And at this juncture, the products here will be, of course, super expensive because the supply is really low, but the demand is ever going to be increasing. How do we fix this solution? On two different ways. Number one, we force companies to shift their business model. Because maybe the tax now is really expensive, what it means is they have to invest and diversify how they make their money and maybe change to greener technologies. Number two, we're also going to subsidize greener companies, right? So they have a kickstart on how they can compete with other companies when it comes to just competing with general market when it comes to selling all of these commodities. Before I move on to my last thing, any other KYs? Sure. All of this just shows the proof panel is that it's only under the side of government that we're able to push these companies towards a greener future by making sure that they actually are able to comply with regulations towards a greener technology at the end of the day. The last thing I want to do in this speech panel is to give you an argument about why the lack of timber pushes for alternatives. The framing for this argument is simple, that right now we are probably living in an era where dissemination of information about climate change is at a high speed level. We are seeing visceral images of how certain people in maybe developing countries are suffering because of the fact that developed countries are stripping our resources and enjoying all of the products that are oftentimes going to be environmentally degrading. What happens here is that we are now trying to reshift the over-reliance on timber because right now we are re-evaluating what is a priority. For example, maybe nowadays we use less timber because it's just inconvenient. We may be shifting towards a more digital format, maybe relying on iPads, for example. Or maybe individual furniture, we go out for all-in-one furniture. Or maybe in properties, for example, we find for alternative materials or carbon fiber, for example, to construct houses. Why is this beneficial? For two different reasons. Number one, investors are going to jump into untapped market in alternatives to timber. This is good because it drives companies to create new replacement products for timber. The second benefit here is that precisely because of the fact that you create a new market for timber's alternative, what it means is that you create more opportunities for locals to diversify on what they sell. So the same two individuals who are probably invested in sculptures, for example, they can do things like, for example, maybe create art out of resin. This is important because these same companies and these same local businesses can still do the exact same thing by making money, but not at the cost of destroying the environment. Thank you.
Right. When a government imposes a tax towards the timber sector in order to pay the taxes, they are burdening the primary sectors. When government burden the primary sectors, will burden the consumers to pay on the products they are selling, for example, furniture, because more demands on furniture in today's world. Consumers will face more struggles, and this also will cause increasement in price and decrease on the demand on the product based on the economic values. At the end, it will also impact the industry as well. When industry is affected, government revenue will decrease. So now, the government will have lesser funding to support the country also. This will also affect the people, ladies and gentlemen. So, quality infrastructure, health and education cannot longer be provided by the government just because of lack of funding. Apart from that, government might ask, why do we have other sources to make funds? We don't have another sources to make more funds, right? How does it just only depend on the timber industry? For an example, our country, Malaysia, is heavily dependent on timber product. Our revenue, according to our studies, Malaysia is in 2020 is 8.14 billion. If you want to impose over 10% of the tax, then how much revenue will be lost for the country? Somehow it is also affecting the country's economic values. As my Prime Minister started earlier about the investor, the scenario will also impact the investor because they will take into consideration the tax they have to pay in particular sectors in their country. Our main concern now is about third world countries that are heavily dependent on the timber sector. As the opponent Prime Minister explained, that these products are made of wood, still making an impact towards the natural environment. Apart from imposing taxes, government can implement more ways to effective guidance. Maybe the government might oppose this also, that they already start replacement of timber. Why am I still asking to implement more? Because we are here to against the biodiversity related taxes, not their suggestions. For an example, enforcement of laws could be taken to protect biodiversity in a way that these countries are legally binded by local international law and pressures. this law agreed upon countries so it's more effective. For example, Paris Agreement. Because the countries in the Paris Agreement have a global pressure to abide by agreement of law. As an operating DP, we are waiting for the government to deeply explain why they want to impose biodiversity taxes compared to other implements they want to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lack of engagement is basically close to you that government has to take. Because notice, at any point we not actually hear what exactly is the alternative coming under opposition side, neither do we see how they're able to solve the problems of the environmental issues, for example, like climate change, or just the atrocities that deforestation brings to people. At least on the government side, there is a form of mechanism to actually prove to you how we actually reduce those particular atrocities. First thing I want to do in first observation is just point out the inconsistencies and inconvenient characterizations that have been taken under opposition side. Because the first question I want to ask is how do they actually solve these environmental particular issues, right? Because notice, the biggest problem statements that they bring up to us, for example, the fact that you lose investors because now it becomes a non-profitable sector, or how you actually just create harms towards the people within the industry. But I think it's important to note that if, for example, these particular market now becomes super duper free within these particular industries, it means that they have to defend the worst parts of it in terms of how there's probably going to be a lot more deforestation to meet all of the demands that they necessarily want to defend. But also it means in order for it to be an industry that's very palatable and interesting to far a lot of investors, it means that you have to opt for more trees being cut down, more furniture being made or probably still being used, right? This probably means that the tipping point was necessary to prove to you how if regulations was there and if, for example, environmental issue was an important thing, that the presence of text being in the picture was the answer to this, and we answered it perfectly even since Prime Minister. I'll give you two particular issues. On first, the scale of change within policies, and the second, a little categorical, way in terms of the stakeholders, right? The first, on the scale of change in policies, I think this is an important issue, and the reason why is to understand this differently. If, for example, things like regulations, the supply chains that happens within the industry, and the presence of the corporations was always something that was important, especially within the timber industry. Within the end goal needs to also talk about the environment. Why so, right? Because at any point, for example, that the state does anything, which is to increase, for example, the economy that we have in the country, or for example, to let consumers have a lot more choices, we think if the end goal would have never been able for you to actually make it a better world for the environment, that would be the answer for this. What does opposition say within their problem statement? Two things. The first is on economical chain reaction, and the second on investors once again. The first one is on economical chain reaction, right? They say that at any point the supply chain changes and you, for example, minimize or reduce the production of timber, then there will be a trickle-down effect to these other actors in it. I think it's important to know how a mechanism or how a model works, which is to just tell you, right, that at the point which you reduce the production that happens with timber, that means that you can also, for example, subsidize particular things that would have been important to society anyway. So if there was a chain reaction that happened, we think we are still able to solve it to a certain extent. They still do not have any they still won't solve the problems, for example, of just finding alternatives that are better for the earth, or for example, finding alternatives for the consumers. On the second, right, on just how does investors now play a big role within the environment? I think it's important because a lot of investors, it's not that they don't necessarily want to opt for things that are green technology or things that are green in nature, but I think in fact there aren't enough corporations who want to do these particular things. So at certain points, like if like Elbow actually defends ESG, we think this becomes a tipping point as to how these particular corporations are able to have a form of green technology at a point in which the state is there to play a role and, for example, just divert these particular allocations now to the subsidies of green technology. This means whatever we've given to you within our implementation, on like the things like conservations of forests that we're able to do, which means we're always able to offset things, for example, just having a lot more oxygen within the ground, or secondly, just how subsidies react like is there in terms of green tech, means that you are able to get the impacts of, for example, first, the shift in demand now changes, right? Which means you're always able to, for example, understand the current situation that happens, but you're also able to mitigate a lot of the harms that necessarily happen because you don't have over concentration of people just opting to timber continuously. But secondly, it just means you have a greener world, right? You just have a lot of like businesses having models that are closer to the ESG, closer to trying to accommodate the green technology they ever tried to offer for timber. Weighing it, just on the magnitude of change, right? Two important things. The first, we give a lot more alternatives, not only for corporations to actually find for other solutions to minimize the problems that happen within the scope, but also we give a lot more alternatives to the consumers who do opt into timber or who do not want to opt into timber at the point in which they are able to question themselves or whether is it something that is expensive, I should be thinking twice about it, or how the durability of these particular things. But secondly, we just have like green technology possibly in this world. This is important because certain areas that would have never had this catalyst to green technology would especially need this in order to access a lot of things that actually give them a healthier lifestyle. The fact that you're able to not have constant air pollution, the fact that you're able to reduce the amount of probably money you have to do in terms of just paying for a normal car instead of a heating, right? Before I get to my second one, is there any QS? Okay. Now, the second issue here is just on stakeholders. I think there are two important stakeholders that are also like agreed by opposition. First is the corporation within the supply chain, and secondly, onto the consumers, right? The only thing that's important, I think, that we've heard from government side is this idea of primary sector that came out in the debate, alongside this idea of how you now have like timber corporations that now have monopolies within that industry. Here's how we try to break this particular question, right? I think it's important to note that these particular stakeholders that exist within this debate doesn't just stop in a a vacuum, right? There's always a constant trickle-down effect. So for example, if you're approaching it from the top, which is like have corporations who probably now have to think of using timbers differently because you have to pay a lot, there's a trickle-down effect. So maybe the price becomes a lot more expensive on a consumer level, but that means that now consumers have to opt into finding all these particular alternatives. What this proves is that if the stakeholders were these particular individual, groups of people that come within this particular process, right? It means that there is a chain reaction that changes at the point in which you have these particular subsidies, even on surface level. Imagine this particular world that you exist. All those reasons go for
biodiversity is one of the most important natural resources in Malaysia. Therefore, I agree that we hold the responsibility to manage our biodiversity. Respectable government claim that timber sector is one of the main causes of biodiversity loss. However, the government clearly needs to mention about the effort that timber company or industry did to reduce the impact from logging. So, the first thing that I want to mention is about how the first speaker or the Prime Minister says that we should take another initiative or alternative to use green products, because they just stated the green products that were said by Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister themselves, but they never stated what kind of green products that we need to help, that we need to use, or as the alternative. So, is it really true that we are actually ignoring the fact that biodiversity problem related is coming from us? So we cannot deny company, in all is actually making an effort to reduce the impact of the. Say for example, the first thing first that I want to emphasize, the obligate company or corporate that supply people have, this is the alternative that I want to deliver. We have to obligate company or corporate body that supply people to replant number of trees as equal as how we allow. Okay, the second alternative that I want to mention is that we want to offer that the timber company offer to enhance and the preserve for our forests that are one of the main sources of biodiversity. Why does this? So this is why the government side failed to give us alternative, failed to give us alternative. Because why I say so? They keep saying that we should use another alternative, without considering that there will be another consequences. So what I say so for the two alternatives that I give this now, first, replant trees is something that the most timber companies in Malaysia and around the world in many years. Say for example, timber company in Malaysia and MTC do not merely cut trees, but they also practice reducing impact of cooking by, as I said, replant trees. Second of all, for my second alternative that I gave, timber company in Malaysia and MTC also has cooperated with state forestry to reduce the impact of cooking as well as it helping to reduce the impact of biodiversity. It is so wrong for the government to falsely accuse us that we must take another alternative to reduce the impact of the biodiversity in our country. So now you will tell me, this company had contributed a lot of effort to make sure our biodiversity system will preserve. Is it fair for you to put all the burden on us, not only us, but then the prices also going to go up and go to the consumers, which also affected them. Is it fair for us and is it fair for them? So, the two alternatives that I offer that the government side failed to do is a fair situation, not only for the company, but also for the consumers and also for the government.
What's the incentive for companies to lessen the number of trees they use? What's the incentive for companies to lessen the number of trees they use?
Okay. As for the company, especially for the licensed company, we cannot simply go around the forest and log the trees. Of course, we have to follow the standard given by the authority in Malaysia, in which how many per square you can log per day. Therefore, it is not in our authority or under our power to simply log forests. So, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister himself, we say about tech alternative, about the green industry and whatnot, and even the whip of the government is saying so. So, I want to emphasize that the energy process of other products is actually at least 1 time more higher, like glasses, cement, carbon fiber even, like 5% and so on, based on MTC website itself. That's why many people are reliant on the timber. Thus, pushing for alternatives doesn't support the sustainability that their own sites is mentioning, which lead to their thing to crumble up. So, the government itself asks, how do you expect that the country, for my deputy leader of opposition said, he emphasizing about the investor, how do you expect that the other country investor believe in the whole investment? Since timber is well known 4 years and well demand. Moreover, people also turn a lot to new replacement over the products they use more in their lives. Somehow the government forgot that these sectors going to drain down their investors too, and which are not only the company going to suffer loss, but also the government. Therefore, I stand to my stance that this house, therefore I stand to my stance that this house rejected the government proposal to impose biodiversity-related taxes on the local sector because we have more efficient and convenient alternatives that they do not offer. And this is why we're going to make our debate today. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good evening everyone. So I know we are already at the late evening, but let's have a recap of what the debate session has happened. So first of all, when the government say out, they are talking about trying to implement the taxes. However, as my speech, my argument is all, I'm trying to say that if they fail to implement as such because of few measures that we say about how we are going to ensure that the measure of the tax imposition are going to go across the world and people will understand on the same page that this tax is supposed to be done. And second, about how the fact that when we do taxes, we have to need the people that specialize in it. We need to have the people that can actually regulate and how we need people to actually foresee it. But they fail to do so. Thus meaning that the fact that the participation in the first stage of the government side is actually failing. And going to the second fact where we are talking about how they fighting about this constructing the monopoly and trying to have the small company like the big company itself, the big technology and so on. But as me and my leader has stand about and saying that sometimes not just because you policy it now, it will have because there's always a chain reaction. Ladies and gentlemen, in our world, our economy is really complex. Because of that, there are so many chain reactions. Even though you impose the tax in this sector, it will go to all around any other economic sector because of the chain reaction, which actually is difficult to handle, not as easy as the government side put it. And the third thing is how they say that they are trying to be constructing the monopoly, while in outside they are saying that no, it doesn't work because just because you take down the current monopoly, it doesn't mean that then after that there's no new monopoly. Because at the end of the day, the cycle will goes on and they couldn't prove anything about that. Thus making it a little bit default to be honest. And going on about how they saying that when the second speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister come out and say that the current status quo shows that the demand and supply are really high. That's why people get overwhelming and all. But ladies and gentlemen, in outside of story, we are saying that just because they are trying to put taxes doesn't happen because people, even nowadays, when the status quo now have so many illegal logging. So when you are trying to provide something tighter, it doesn't mean that people are not going to go to the illegal part where illegal loggings are going, there's also demand and supply and all. And these are the things that they couldn't manage to compare. And they also talking about trying to push the corporation to the alternative, and this already be rebutted by better speaker actually, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because we say that just because the alternative is there, it doesn't mean that it's going to be ongoing. It's saying about they want the more sustainable or position in here. But ladies and gentlemen, as proven by the MTC website itself, their people process doesn't consume as much as energy as the other option alternatives that even they are mentioned. So with that, we from the student side of the proud to stand on this side and oppose to this one. Okay.
Alright, I'm just going to summarize the debate of easier to evaluate two things I'll do. Firstly, I'm going to explain what you do and what is responded to. And secondly, what opposition's biggest challenges and how do we solve this forward. Firstly, what did we do is in our speeches and what was it responded to. The first important thing that we did was proving to you that commercialization of timber contributes to climate change. We say that people over-rely on them on a variety of reasons. Like making spoons for example, and also Diallo said that the money in the timber industry or at least in the timber market amounted to billions. What it means is that there are a lot of consumers and a lot of players in this market. Therefore, we have a large scale operation of logging almost every single day to meet up with the market. The conclusion here is that we've already proven to you that there is an urgent need to stifle this market in order for us to slow down the effects of climate change, especially now it's harder than ever. And secondly, we also say that it's good that we're taxing these companies because the money that we use can incentivize a greener approach for greener companies by terms of subsidies or maybe forcing these people-related companies to change into a greener business model. We say that companies wouldn't have changed their business model because of the fact that timber is super lucrative and it's always going to be there. The conclusion here was that under both sides of the house, which is in status quo, companies were always going to shift into greener business models anyway. The difference here is that government is expediting this process so it's good for everyone. The third thing that we proved was that the conservation efforts that we're going to use by tax money is one that is going to be good. Because now states can go all out in the effort to protect trees. How? We say we tax them because of the fact that we want to commit into carbon offset. Because now we force companies to pay money for cutting down the trees. We get to realize how much is it that it costs to basically destroy the environment, and thus because of that the same money that we tax them, which is oftentimes going to be very high, is going to be reinvested into conservation efforts so that we can protect more monkeys, protect more elephants and whatnot. The last thing I want to talk about here is what were opposition's biggest intentions and how do we do this. First one, they say it's unfair for consumers because it's going to be a positive chain reaction and it's going to be very expensive for everyone. We say, sure, we really don't care because literally buying these products is also buying into the fact that you're contributing towards climate change efforts. But we also say it's unfair for people who don't buy these input products, like maybe children for example, but they are suffering climate change efforts because of the fact that competition wants to have cheaper input products that are good for everyone. Until now, we still don't know whether or not these cheaper products are life-changing to the point where it does create a dire need for it to be cheap. Proven to you that it's not good to you, that it's still okay to make it expensive. What is not good here is that states, at the very least, taxing companies is something that is not new and states have been doing it for generations. For example, states increase interest rates during inflation, which makes products super expensive because of the fact that you want to make sure that expenditure in the market goes down and that the price of products also go down to counter inflation. The last thing that they said was that companies will suffer in general. We say no, this does not happen because they can still shift into greener industries, but they can just shift into business model and we give them subsidies. Even if they suffer, for example, we still say it's fine because their greed was what causes the destruction of the planet because of the fact that they contributed to destroying homes of indigenous people who eviscerated along the process in the name of money. So because of that, a lot of soil erosion happens. Because of that, a lot of flooding happens, landslide happens, and just like destruction of homes to a lot of the flora and fauna that exists. What it means here is that we dealt to do the biggest intentions in this debate, and because of that, we will